and how we can learn to achieve sustainable society, which is that has been given what is crucial, which is futurology and need for foresighting. Okay, so it is time for us to be responsible. This is our world, and clearly it is our responsibility to make it a better place. So if not us, who will act for it? Then who might be? So we have a lot of work to do after this. Okay, so we have heard from Professor Rahman's perspective on social development and sustainable society in a globalized world. Now, I am pleased to invite all of you to join the next keynote address titled Rethinking Development by Professor Dr. Muhammad Syukri Salleh from University Science Malaysia, who will be introduced and moderated by Associate Professor Dr. Hazizan Matnoon, our Head of Islamization Committee at the Department of Sociology and Anthropology and former Dean of AHAS KIRKHS. Dr. Hazizan, the stream is yours.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقهوا قولي سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم. Thank you very much, Brother Daniel, the MC for today's program. Let me give salam to everyone. Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Respected Professor Dr. Shukran Abdul Rahman, Dean of Abdul Hamid Abu Sulaiman Kuliah of Islamic Arabian Knowledge and Human Sciences, Associate Professor Dr. Nur Azlan Muhammad Noor, Chairperson of the conference, SIDIC 2023. Our keynote speaker for this session, Professor Dr. Muhammad Syukri Salleh from USM, Professor Dr. Abdul Rahman, if you are still around, Prof, from UKM. Our Head of Department of Sociology, International Islamic University, Malaysia, Associate Professor Dr. Rohaiza Rokis. Dear participants, Malaysians and non-Malaysians, students, postgraduate and undergraduate, ladies and gentlemen. I'm indeed privileged to be given this opportunity to chair the second session for today's proceeding. That is keynote address by our Professor Dr. Muhammad Syukri Salleh. The title of his presentation would be Rethinking Development. So I would like to welcome you, Prof. Before we proceed with your presentation, I would like to read a brief CV of Professor Syukri. Actually, I have two versions of CV. One is 43 or 45 pages. Yeah. So if I were to read this, then I think the whole duration of this session will be taken up by this. So therefore, I will only reduce to one page CV of our professor. Professor Syukri bin Salleh, or his pen name is Muhammad Syukri Salleh, holds a Bachelor of Social Sciences honors in Rural Studies in 1978 from University Science Malaysia. He has a diploma in economics obtained in 1980 and a Master of Arts in Rural Development in 1981 from University of East Anglia, United Kingdom, and a Doctor of Philosophy in Islamic-based Development 1991 from University of Oxford, UK. He is currently an honorary professor of Islamic Development Management Center for Islamic Development Management Studies, or ISDEF, of the University of Science Malaysia. And he was also the founding director of the center. Currently, he is also an adjunct professor of the Faculty of Islamic Development Management at the University Sultan Sharif Ali, UNISA, Negara Brunei Darussalam, as well as adjunct professor in the School of Arts, Humanities and Social Sciences, Asia University, Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia. Professor Muhammad Syukri has been appointed by 18 University. I must mention that this CV is dated 6 October 2022. So some of this might have been, I believe there are many updates. So I must say that this is the CV for the last 6 months, when I also chaired one session of him. So yes, he has been appointed by 18 universities and academic institutions in 7 countries: Malaysia, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, Japan, United Kingdom, Negara Brunei Darussalam, and Indonesia, and others, as adjunct professor, visiting professor, honorary fellow, visiting fellow, visiting scholar, and faculty member. He has, at 6 of October 2022, about 236 publications in the form of book, e-books, chapters in books, journal articles, review articles, popular articles, and so on, to his credit. He has served as International Advisory Council, Chairman of Advisory Board, Reviewer Board, and Editorial Board of 70 national and international academic journals. He has also delivered a total of about 360 keynote addresses, academic solicited talks, and working papers at various academic meetings nationally and internationally. He has undertaken 59 national and international research and consultancy projects, especially in Malaysia, Negara Brunei Darussalam, Indonesia, Thailand, Singapore, and Vietnam. And he is associated with 14 professional bodies in the United Kingdom, United States of America, Canada, the Netherlands, Bangladesh, Indonesia, and Thailand. So I think with this brief 1 out of 45 pages of this, then I would now like to invite Professor Syukri. I am fortunate to have been preceded by my colleague, Dr. Sharifa, who has already mentioned about the some rules here, that Professor Syukri will be giving talk until 11:15, after which we will have question and answer from the floor. So the floor is yours, Professor.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil mursalin Sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. La hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-azim. Astaghfirullah al-azim. Astaghfirullah al-azim. Astaghfirullah al-azim. Thank you very much, Brother Associate Professor Dr. Hazizan, and also for the long introductions of me. Actually, it can be shortened. And then my respected Dean, Professor Dr. Sultan Abdul Rahman, Associate Professor Dr. Nur Azlan Muhammad Nur, chairpersons of the conference, and also my respected Professor Emeritus Dr. Abdullah Rahman Ambong, keynote address speakers, my brothers and sisters, all the participations. Nice to meet you all, and then thank you very much, the organizing committee, for inviting me to this listening conference, and hopefully that we can share a bit of my knowledge with the title of Rethinking Development. Yeah. So my aim is to bring us back to the basics of the development studies, and by rethinking it, and then to look in a very bigger picture of the problems, and especially the crisis. So as we are aware of, we are having a lot of crises now. Next slide, please. May I control my slides? Yeah, may I share and control my slides so that I can move it freely without directing to the ini? Boleh nggak?
Please, our technical team, you allow Prof to share, and maybe you can unshare yours. Professor would like to control from his side. So, Prof, please.
Yes. All right.
Oh, thank you.
Then apa ya?
Yes, we can see.
Alhamdulillah, alhamdulillah. Okay. All right. The title of the presentation is Rethinking Development. And
sorry, Prof, it's not yet in the presentation mode. If you may.
Oh, it's all right.
Yeah.
Right. Done.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. As we are aware of, we are now facing a lot of crises. Yeah. The global crisis, in fact. And I think the organizer has rightly put it in the poster, which lists on all the crises, which includes inequalities, poverty, food security, healthcare, violence, crimes, education, refugees, migrants, disabled, children, women, elderly, and so forth. So what we need to do now is just to rethink and asking about 5 questions. Yeah. Number 1 is what type of crises are actually we are facing with, and number 2, do we adopt right development theoretical underpinnings? And number 3, do we submit the right fundamental development assumptions? Number 4, do we treat development problems rightfully? For instance, poverty, SDGs, justice, inequality, and so forth. And number 5, do we use right research methodology? So meaning to say that actually what we are going to discuss is to identify the type of the crisis, so that we can put it in a right discipline that we can later on overcome and try to formulate all those prescriptions, not only the prescription, but also to diagnose the problems and hence providing the prescriptions. Yeah. And so number 1 is to identify the types of the crisis. And number 2 is to deal with the theoretical underpinnings, to look back at our development theoretical underpinnings. And number 3 is to look at the development assumptions that we are using. And number 4, the treatment of the problems. And number 5 is the research methodology that we are using. We are undertaking in diagnosis and also prescribing the solutions to the problems. Yeah? So let's go to number 1, the type of the crisis. If we observe all the crises that we have mentioned just now, and in fact, the other crises also which we do not mention here. So it seems that it comprises of transdisciplinary fields. It includes law, anthropology, sociology, gender, economics, political science, international relations, human geography, critical historical studies, environmental, humanities, indigenous studies, decolonial and post-colonial studies, and it includes also technical and natural sciences. So you want to see all this within a disciplinary, so we can see that actually it is a very characteristics of the development studies, because we see that the crisis also involve transdisciplinary processes of social, cultural, ecological, economic, and political change. And also it involves the people, organization, practices, the states, the knowledges that engage in these development-related processes. So it's kind of not only transdisciplinary fields, but also transdisciplinary process. So these transdisciplinary characteristics portray very much of the characteristics of development studies. And we can conclude that actually the crises are actually development crises. So as the Professor Emeritus, Dr. Abraham Bo was saying just now, that the last slide he was asking us, do we see all the problems in interconnected or in silo? So with the identification of the crisis, I think the answer is definitely that we have to see it from a transdisciplinary perspective, and therefore we have to see the interrelatedness of all the crises within all the disciplines, which we call the development crisis. Yeah. So the solutions to the crisis definitely that we cannot do that in silo, but instead we have to do that from a disciplinary approach to development studies, not a single disciplinary approach, so as to allow the operation of holistic and comprehensive perspective, inshallah. So we come to a conclusion that actually the crisis, development crisis, this is not only merely economic crisis, sociological crisis, gender crisis, political crisis, or anything like that. So we have to see that in a holistic and also comprehensive perspective. This is the answer to question 1. This relates very much, if we were to agree that actually the crises are development crises, but the next questions to be asked is which development? Which development? Are we referring to the developments that emerges from within neoclassical philosophy or from radical, meaning to say Marxist and neo-Marxist philosophies, or the mixed philosophies as is portrayed in the SDGs, Sustainable Development Goals, and also in the basic needs approach. And so we have to make sure that which actually development that we mean. Yeah. So if we were to see the neoclassical crisis, probably we are confined to two main theories of the neoclassical that emerge from neoclassical philosophies. There are the growth theories and redistribution with growth theories. If we were to take radical development theories, development philosophies, then we need to take the perspective for the Marxist or neo-Marxist, the radical perspective. But then if you were to be a bit flexible, we want to mix the both philosophies. So we're dealing with sustainable development theories and also the basic need theories. For me, I think all these theories, all these philosophies, yeah, either neoclassical, radical, or mixture philosophies, as well as the theories, they are actually just one. Even though we can see that they are actually contradictory to each other, but I think they come from within the same paradigms with the same underpinnings and also the assumptions that we'll discuss later on, inshallah. The other question is that as we are Muslims, do we want to see it from within Islamic injunctions, Islamic-based development? And for me personally, I think definitely that we have to look at from Islamic-based development, because as a Muslim, it is not only an alternative. I cannot say that Islamic-based development is an alternative anymore. It is a must, because as a Muslim, definitely that we need to apply everything in our life within the framework of the Islamic injunctions. And therefore, the development tool that we need to base that into Islamic paradigms. So it is no more an alternative, it is a must. And then I think when we can see that our friends, our colleagues, why you say the word alternative for Islam and they are Muslim, I think that is not right. Yeah, where the alternative is not right. Words to be used for us, the Muslims. But the problems are definitely that we can see that there are efforts and also endeavors done by many of our colleagues, our Muslim colleagues, and also there are a few non-Muslims colleagues who are thinking of establishing Islam within their own paradigms or their own disciplines, yeah, their own respective disciplines. But I can see the contemporary problems of the so-called Islamic approach to development, especially, and also the Islamic economics, that there are two problems. Number one, I observe that the Islamic-based development is interchangeably used and also equalized with economic development. So we can see if you read the economic development materials, and the writers are using both economic development and development as if they are the same. I think for me, it is not the same. Even though the economic development also try to include all the aspects of the development. But I think development comprises of economics. So economics is actually a subset of development studies, and therefore we cannot say that economic development is equal to development. And that is one of the things that probably we need to strengthen, and inshallah to have to put back on the right tracks. Number two, we can observe that there are adoptions of what we can call accommodative modification approach. We tend to be very flexible to accommodate whatever that we think good and is not contradictory to Islamic injunctions from the Western ethnocentric paradigms. So we accommodate that and try to modify by interjecting the nas of the Quran and Hadith to put whatever Islamic elements that we can think of to justify that actually what we are formulating is the Islamic approach to development, or Islamic approach to economics, or Islamic approach to sociology, or anything like that. So end up, especially in development studies or in economic development, we can see that actually what we are doing is just what we can call a fixed-based neoclassical development. The paradigm is still the neoclassical paradigms, and we inject all sorts of fixed-based elements into it to justify that actually it is an Islamic development or Islamic economics. So this is another thing that I think we need to think of. And we have to formulate our own Islamic developments from within Islamic injunction, inshallah. And then the four solutions, Islamic development must emerge from within Islamic philosophical and epistemological development underpinnings, and especially from within the Islamic tasawwur, Islamic worldview, and also Islamic epistemology. So what I mean by development underpinnings is actually based on Islamic tasawwur and also Islamic epistemology. Yeah, that is the second answer for the second questions. And the third one is the assumptions. The assumptions. We observe that actually the Western ethnocentric development assumptions need to be recontemplated. There are two main assumptions formulated by the Western ethnocentric development theories. They are scarcity of resources, and number one is unlimited wants. I can observe that from the writings of anything Islamic, in anything Islamic, and Islamic economy, Islamic development, Islamic whatever Islam is that, not many touch on the scarcity of resources and the unlimited wants. Yeah, not many touch on the assumptions of the very assumptions of the theory itself. So I think we need to take into account the scarcity of resources and to look back to recontemplate on the scarcity of resources and one, so that we will have a right assumption so that we can diagnose the right problems and also prescribes the right prescriptions for the crisis that we're facing now. The question is that, is it true that resources are scarce? The answer is yes, physically. The more you use the resources, and definitely it will decrease. But then when we were to look at it from Islamic perspective, and then we will meet with the concept of risk sustenance. And also we have to take account into the concept of barakah, the blessings of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And also we have to take account into the Islamic redistribution mechanisms that are advocated by Islam. So when we come to the concept of risk, Allah guarantees that all creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala are granted with sustenance. And therefore, we don't have to worry about that. And then from that perspective, actually, resources are not scarce because everybody is allocated for sustenance. The only question is that some got a lot of sustenance, a lot of risk. Some when they were given a little risk. But then again, when we talk about the concept of barakah, the blessing of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, quantitative measurement is no more relevant in this sense, because we can see that a little risk with a lot of barakah is much more preferable and also sejahtera, as opposed to many risks but then little barakah. So barakah plays very important elements to determine the effectiveness and also the satisfactions of the human beings in consumption, in consuming the risk, the sustenance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But again, when we talk about redistribution mechanisms of the risk, and we come to a conclusion that actually those who got a lot of risk is not necessarily theirs. The whole things are theirs. So in that there are portions of the risk that should be given through the redistribution process, like wakaf, zakat, sadaqah, infaq, and so forth, to the people who are having a little risk. So with the risk, the concept of risk, the concept of barakah, and also the concept of redistribution mechanisms in Islam. So the questions of the resources of scarce need to be reformulated, inshallah, and then that can come up with a kind of a more right perspective in overcoming the problems that they are facing now. The other thing is that, is it true that wants are limited? The answer is yes. Wants are limited is for some people who are having desires at a low level. We came to understand that actually the desires of nafs, are having a few levels. The lowest is the amarah, lawamah, mulhamah, and the higher is the mutma'innah, radiyah, madiyah, and the highest is the kamila. So if we were to look at it from this perspective, we can see that those people who are having low levels of desires, low levels of nas, like amarah, lawamah, and mulhamah, they are having unlimited wants. It is right that they are having unlimited wants. But those who are having a higher nafs, such as mutma'innah, radiyah, madiyah, and kamila, then inshallah their wants are limited. They only consume according to their needs, not according to the wants. And therefore now, for those people with the higher nafs at the level of mutma'innah, radiyah, madiyah, and kamila, so the consumption pattern change, from basing on the wants to be based on needs. So, and therefore it will comes out with a kind with different kinds of diagnosis and also prescriptions of the problems, inshallah. So the solution is that we need a new solutions. We need to create and to formulate a new solution based on our new assumptions. And that also includes the overcoming of the problems of the lack of these concepts related to resources and the low levels of the nafs. So our assumption has to be right, inshallah, in order to overcome the problems of the crisis that we are facing now. Number 4, with the, say for instance, we have the new developments of underpinnings and other assumptions, and the treatments of the development crisis also needs to be different. Yeah. For instance, we have to see poverty not fully from a disastrous perspective, but I think we need to see poverty. We need to treat poverty from a more friendly treatment, because from the history of human beings and also during the Prophet Rasulullah SAW and the Khalifa of Rashidin, or even up to the Khalifa, the time of the Khalifa Umar Abdul Aziz, the poverty always persisted, and we could not see at any moment in the history of human beings that there is zero poverty. So from this, we can come to a conclusion that actually poverty is not to be eliminated. A little bit it can be alleviated, but then what is much more, we need to manage the poverty rather than to eliminate the poverty. And then we can discuss this in further details when we talks about the concept of barakah, the concept of risk, and also the redistribution mechanism. So I think what most of us are doing now, or treating poverty now, it is not very right, I think, and we need to rethink about it again, inshallah. So is the SDGs, yeah, SDGs. Some says the SDGs is no problem if you were to adopt it within the Islamic community, because from the 17 goals of the SDGs, except the gender, probably the problems of the gender, but the others, it seems that it is quite all right. But I think our friends who are looking from that perspective, they are actually restricted to looking at operational level, merely at operational level. Yeah, but it is not enough, and definitely we have also to see it at philosophical level, and meaning that we have to see it from the tasawwur of Islam, from the philosophical underpinnings, the epistemological underpinnings of Islam, and then when we see it, and then we have to redefine from Islamic perspective all the goals and all the concepts involved in the SDGs. So meaning that we have to Islamize all the goals of the, we have to redefine and Islamize all the goals of the SDGs, and then we can operate the SDGs and try to achieve the SDGs in our own way from within our Islamic paradigms, not from the United Nations, which is dominated by the Western ethnocentric thinking. Yeah, so also justice and equality. They must not be confined only to quantitative measurement, but also much more to take into account the qualitative measurement also, because if we were to take the neoclassical perspective of redistributions to achieve justice and to reduce inequality, so we are talking about redistributions of the incremental wealth as advocated by the neoclassical economics. And if you were to take the radical economics perspective, we are talking about redistributions of means of productions, which are all tangible entities, which is inadequate and insufficient to come to the roots of the problems. Yeah, And where we need also in this case to study about the right position to put the justice and equality in the right position, the place for justice. And also we need to talk about needs rather than wants in order to calm the inequality. So there is this is the fourth, and the last one is about the research methodology. When we were we were rethinking about the developments, and we were saying that we need to have the right development underpinnings. We have to have the right Islamic development assumptions. We have to treat the development crisis properly and rightfully. And all these needs and necessitate a right research methodology. So the question is, which research methodology? Are we going to continuing to adopt the conventional research methodology, or are we going to use the Islamic research methodology? For me personally, I think we need to formulate Islamic research methodology and not using the conventional research methodology. Why? At least I have three reasons for this. Number one, it is illogical and in fact incompatible to adopt conventional research methodology to research on Islamic-based development or Islamic or crises that are seen from Islamic perspective. So actually, we are using incompatible tools of analysis to understand about the problems from the Islamic perspective. This is the first question. But a more critical research is this, we can observe that the tools of analysis of the conventional research methodology are only confined to merely scientific truth. And it is therefore inadequate, because scientific truth means that we can consider something is true if it can scientifically be proven, meaning that we have to have that tangible proof on that. If not, they are saying that actually that something is not the truth. So, I think with that kind of tools of analysis, they are unable to understand the intangibles which we believe in, about the alam ghaib, the Islamic unseen concepts and belief. So therefore, if you were to use the conventional research methodology, we're not able to understand the roots of the problems. Say, for instance, if you were to research on the patterns of consumption of the Muslims during Ramadan, for instance, we can see that there are a lot of foods during Ramadan, a lot of bazaars, and the question is whether the Muslim eat more during Ramadan or eat less. So if we're using the conventional research methodology, and then we will take into considerations probably the measurements of the calories, the spending, the expenditure, and the intakes of the food, and so forth. All are tangibles, the tangible elements of the consumption. But if we were to use the Islamic research methodology, so we have to take into consideration the concept of nafs, for instance, the desires which actually determine the urge to urge the consumption patterns. So actually consumption has been stimulated by our nafs. So we have to understand the levels of the nafs of the consumers rather than just confined to the calorie intake, the expenditure of the income, and so forth. So definitely it is the tools of analysis of the consumer research methodology very limited and are not able to understand the intangibles that we believe in, the Muslim believe in. And the third one, I think this is more serious. I think the conventional research methodology has been given birth by the foundations of the sciences. And we can see that there are a lot of concepts of the social sciences, which I think is quite dangerous to Muslim faith. So for instance, the concept of scientific, which only confines to the tangible proof of something, and also the anti-dogmatic. They ask researchers, including the Muslim researchers, to give away or ignore the dogma that we are holding. Yeah, we have to be anti-dogmatic so that we will arrive at an objectivity, at an objective analysis of our research and also findings. So this is quite problematic also, because we have to have the dogma, we have to believe in it, and we have to really yakin it up to the hakul yakin, and we cannot question on our dogmas, especially rukun iman and rukun Islam. And I think with the kind of anti-dogmatic culture in the social sciences, that probably is quite dangerous to Muslim faith. So is the value free. In order to get the objectivity in our research, we are asked to depart from our value, whatever that we are holding to, and so that from there we can analyze it objectively without any bias. This is among a few concepts in social sciences that probably we need to look back, to rethink, and try to adjust it so that our Muslim faith are not jeopardized by all these social sciences concepts. So meaning that the research methodology also has to be based on Islamic research methodology. Then the question is there any Islamic research methodology that has been established at the moment? There are a few, I think, writings on it. In fact, from Ahas also, I came to know one or two brothers there, writings on Islamic research methodology. And then also, well, from in India, from I think Lucknow University also used to do that. And we at ISTEF, the Center for Islamic Development Management Studies at USM, are also trying to develop the Islamic research methodology. And inshallah, hopefully one day, we can use Islamic research methodology in replaced to the conventional research methodology. So in conclusion, I think in understanding of overcoming the crisis, the present crisis, that we need to view that crisis from a big picture perspective. And that big picture is the development studies perspective. And this will subsequently followed by theoretical framework, the adjustments, the amendments of the theoretical framework and underpinnings, the assumptions, the treatments to develop problems, and also the research methodology adopted, inshallah. And all have to be emerged from within a real Islamic paradigm, inshallah. So that's all that I want to say, Brother Dr. Azizan. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you very much, Professor Muhammad Syukri. MashaAllah, it has been a very elaborate and meaningful, there are many meaningful insights on the topic that has been assigned to Professor, that is rethinking development. Maybe one big conclusion that I can make here is that I mean, really we have to rethink. Really we have to rethink. And there are a lot of things that we have to rethink. Professor Dr. Muhammad Syukri has very nicely put his presentation in a very organized, easy to understand manner. And I have, and I believe many of us also have no problem of following it, very systematic, as usual, Prof. I enjoy listening to your presentation because within short period of time, we are able to grab a lot of things, not only from your wide knowledge, but also the way you present it has made it possible for us to what you call this internalized. Professor has made his presentation by putting questions, 5 questions, and each of these questions has been deliberated, and Alhamdulillah, thank the professor for keeping the time also with us here. And we have a bit more time now until, I guess, let me see, now is 11:19. We have more or less 11 minutes for question and answer. So without further delay, I would like to now give opportunity to the floor if you have any question to Prof. Yes. Anybody would like to start the ball rolling?
Assalamualaikum warahmatullah.
Waalaikumsalam. Can you introduce yourself?
Oh yes, thank you for the opportunity. My name is Shariza. I'm from ISDEF USF.
Okay, please. Yeah.
Okay. So
Welcome.
if Alhamdulillah, thank you for the opportunity. First of all, I'd like to thank Prof. Syukri for a wonderful sharing. As correctly mentioned by the moderator, there's a lot of rethinking. You have managed to stir us up in a way. I'm looking at how it's interesting to note that actually everything that we are doing is related to development, yet the discipline or the field of development actually especially in the Malaysian context seems to have or to get the what do I call it back row kind of focus. I'm looking at how many of us actually have knowledge or are actually embark in a formal kind of study on development, and I can say unfortunately I would say most of us who are in the Malaysian context especially involved in development planning, whatever development strategy policies, I don't think they have even been exposed to the knowledge or the framework of what development studies is about. So that is the first. Secondly, I mean, now we are talking, that is conventional development. And now you're talking about Islamic development. How to bring this forward, Prof? It's like, would you agree if I say that we are trading on a steep hill and we are going on the opposite direction in a way? So how can we turn that around, in your opinion? Thank you. I hope that clears the air. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much.
Shariza here.
Yeah, Shariza from ISDEF, from
Yeah,
the same
yes.
center. Thank you very much. We are glad to have you with us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, I think the 2 questions are very clear. Of course, I agree with this. The one who asked that right from the very beginning of human history, development has always been related to us. And in the modern time, we have many disciplines and many people are working, but yet they don't take what we call development studies to understand development. So that is one question. The second one is regarding Islamic development. So we add more to the complexity of the development studies by talking about Islamic development. So Prof, please enlighten us.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Shariza. Yes, I think you are right. Development studies at the moment, especially in Malaysia, have not been attracted by many, even though there are development studies departments in, so for instance, in Malaya, and also in UPM, and also in UKM, and also in USM. But the name is not really development studies. Faculty of Development Studies as what is available in other countries like UK, for instance. Yeah, for instance, in the University of East Anglia in Norwich, there is a School of Development Studies. So they are talking about everything's in there, economics, politics, and within that school. And but yes, you are right, Dr. Syriza. I think in Malaysia, we need to have the development studies to get all the disciplines together and look it from a transdisciplinary perspective. We used to try that, even though we don't call that Islamic, we don't call that development studies, but now there is trends of transdisciplinary studies. You see, if you can see the historical perspective of development studies or of higher education in Malaysia, for instance, we started with one-dimensional disciplines, just one. Politics is one, sociology is one, in separations from other disciplines. But then later on, that our seniors were aware of the necessity, the needs to integrate all the disciplines, but they come up with what they call a multidisciplinary perspective or approach. But it is also not enough because we talk about the one-dimensional discipline. We can only able to introduce what we can call a well intellectual. Well means telaga, yeah, telaga or small. Yeah, it's very deep, and but then they do not know anything what is around them. Yeah, the other disciplines. That's why our seniors try to move it to the what they call a multidisciplinary perspective. But then it is still confined to producing what we can call the very intellectual. Very intellectual means the V, yeah? And they know definitely in depth the disciplines, but at the same time, they also understand a little bit of whatever disciplines are related to their own respective discipline. But it's not enough until comes opinions to establish an approach which they call transdisciplinary approach, and then which is believed to be able to produce what they call oceanic intellectuals, yeah, or who are familiar with all related disciplines to diagnose any problems and to solve any problems. So in USM, we used to have that kind of transdisciplinary approach, even though they don't call it development approach, on banana trees, for instance. With one banana trees, the scientists will approach it, try to understand the biotechnology of the banana, for instance, to enhance the fruits, and also the yields of it, and then the economics will come, how to make money from that trees, and then the sociology will come, how we're going to interact, to get the people interacting with each other. And there are a lot of discipline, or even the craft, the seni, yeah, also will come, how to make how to produce any crafts, any from that trees, and also the medicine will come, whether the banana can also be used as a medicine to any kinds of disease. And we used to do that in USM, they call that. But I think it is high time for us to have a special faculty or at least department. We are trying to do that in ISTEF. We establish what we call the management, the Islamic development, but we add it to the management because Islamic development per se is quite static and mechanistic. We have to manage that so that we can mobilize the development, the Islamic development. So hopefully that inshallah, one day we can see in our country at least, there will be a faculty of development studies or anything like that. And at international level, we can see development studies is quite strong. In Australia, for instance, they have quite strong and active Australian Development Studies Association. And if in the UK also, they have the DSA, Development Studies Association also, which include all kinds of disciplines within that and try to think to overcome the problems of the day today. So that's one. The question number two now, how are we going to move from the conventional development to Islamic development? Actually, in Malaysia, our government were trying to do that. And we can see from the time of Dr. Mahathir, for instance, he introduced penerapan nilai Islam inculcations of the good values. And then when Tun Abdul Hamid Badawi came, and then he introduced Islam Hadari. And later on, when the PH rules the country, they introduced Rahma'anan. Before that, Datuk Najib also introduced Wasatiyah, Maqasid Syariah, and then Malaysian Islamic Index Malaysia. And then later on, followed during the PH government, they introduced Rahmatan lil Alamin. And then later on, the Mahash Rabbani during the rules of Muhyiddin Yassin. And then later on, when Premier Sabri, they introduced Piagam 91. And then recently now, we were introduced with Malaysia Madani. And I think from all this, we can see there are elements of Islam in that. But the problems, the sustainability, because all the programs changes, and then the problem change or disappear whenever the political advocates of the programs goes. So it is more dependence on the political figures who introduced or advocated that programs, and when they stops to rule the country, and then so is the programs. So there is a problem of sustainability. That is the one problem. The other one of the problems of inadequacy, insufficiency. So for instance, in calculations of Islamic values or good values only concentrate on the good values of the administrative officers. And then when Islam Hadari were introduced, it seems that it covers a kind of development-based strategy, Islamic-based strategy, development strategy, and which include quite comprehensive elements of it. But when Potlah goes, and then so is the Islam Hadari. And when Maqasid Syariah Islamic Index, Islamic Malaysia Index, Islamic Sharia Index, something like that, Index Sharia Malaysia, Index Sharia Malaysia. I think our IIUM's rector were one of the pioneers of that. But when Najib, it is only concentrate on the commentary and other ministries try to measure to what extent respective ministry has implemented Islam, and they try to measure that, and then try to overcome the problem if there is any. But that's only confines to the ministry, to the ministries, not to all the populations. And then so was the Rahmatan lil Alamin is much more of administrations of Islam in Malaysia. And then Manhaj Urbani is only the administrations of the agencies under JAKIM or under the ministry, the Minister of the Religious Affairs under the Prime Minister's Department. And so was the Piagam 91. And now Malaysia Madani. Malaysia Madani, we have yet to observe what is actually, we are trying to understand what is Malaysia Madani. And if we read the books on it, so the 6 pillars is kemampanan, sustainability, kesejahteraan, daya cipta, hormat, keyakinan, ihsan, and all are good values, I think, which is not contrary to Islam. And the advocates of Malaysia Madani also was saying that actually Madani is based on traditional civilizational of the Islamic tradition of Islamic civilizational traditions. Yeah, even though some were saying that actually it is just a civil society, but then the question is whether the conventional civil society, the Islamic civil society. So we have to see that, but the conclusion is that almost all governments, the Malaysian governments, since Dr. Mahathir were trying to have their own Islamic, which we can consider Islamic approach to development, but the problems is insufficiency and also the sustainability of them. Hopefully that Malaysia Madani will prove and have a longer life as opposed to the previous one, inshallah. Thank you, Dr. Siriza and Brother Dr. Azizat.